What is the nature of our existence after we die? Does the entirety of our experience cease for all time? Or is it possible that we persist in some form? A significant majority of the global population holds the conviction that death is not the definitive conclusion of life, and that past this enigmatic boundary, some part of us continues. The prevailing perspective within secular academic circles suggests that such beliefs are little more than a form of psychological comfort, a construct born from our anxiety about mortality and our conceptual difficulty in grasping the absolute cessation of experience. I, too, find it challenging to conceive of how this immense cosmos could be structured in a way that preserves every individual mind at the moment of its passing, presumably for an eternity. On a personal level, I do not subscribe to any religion, but I still cannot bring myself to summarily dismiss the prospect of survival. Despite the multitude of breakthroughs in modern science, reality itself continues to be a profoundly puzzling phenomenon. For instance, there are well-regarded philosophers and intellectuals who entertain the non-trivial likelihood that our whole reality is an elaborate simulation, engineered by a superior civilization with intentions that lie far beyond our capacity to understand. It is self-evident that if our existence is indeed a simulation, then any predictions about what we might encounter at death become entirely speculative. Many people propose that accounts such as those from near-death experiences, NDEs, and cases of apparent reincarnation provide potential indications of survival. Within the realm of the paranormal, one can find numerous reports of bizarre occurrences that defy conventional explanations, and I have personally reviewed a variety of cases that I find to be profoundly unusual. In fact, my academic background is in psychology, which I studied at the University of Northampton in the UK, one of the very few universities globally that maintains a department dedicated to parapsychology. My undergraduate curriculum included reading about some of these peculiar cases. While I was not ultimately persuaded by these specific instances, I do not discard the notion of life after death. On the contrary, I am now certain that it is a reality. In the end, it was not the strange paranormal phenomena that led me to this conviction about the survival of consciousness. Rather, it was a philosophical line of reasoning I came across much later in my journey, during my postgraduate studies in philosophy. Then its extinction. In the final analysis, we are the part of reality that awakens to its own existence. For better or for worse, we are, in a true sense, immortal. We can conceptualize death, but only as an abstract idea viewed from the outside. But it is an illusion. There is no life after death, because there is no death to be experienced. This particular argument, which we will delve into today, seems to prove that consciousness is inherently immortal, that death is a genuine termination of conscious experience is an epistemic fallacy, and that upon dying, we ought to anticipate not an abyss of nothingness, but a continuous sense of always having been, manifesting through the forms of other conscious entities. This line of reasoning, originating from the philosopher Thomas Clarke, can be understood as a variant of impersonal reincarnation, and it represents, in my opinion, the absolute minimum we should expect to encounter following our physical demise. Despite this seemingly audacious assertion, it's a perspective that doesn't hinge, as one might initially assume, on some unconventional theory of consciousness. The argument we are about to explore remains valid even if we inhabit a universe that is entirely physical, governed by unconscious and aimless physical principles. To be perfectly clear, my own inclination is that consciousness might very well be more fundamental to reality than contemporary materialist science has acknowledged. However, I find it truly compelling that a viewpoint making no such claim presents the most profound case for survival I have ever encountered. It is this argument, along with its astonishing ramifications, that we will investigate today. As noted, this reasoning originates with the philosopher Thomas Clarke and is detailed in his essay, Death, Nothingness, and Subjectivity. Clarke initiates his essay by highlighting a remarkably prevalent mistake made by secular and scientific thinkers, the assumption that if death signifies the end of experience, the dying person should expect to be plunged into an oblivion of nothingness. Clarke cites numerous secular intellectuals who have substituted religious ideas of heaven and hell with this notion of nothingness. He observes that many secularists have erroneously portrayed death as a form of positive nothing, an everlasting state into which the experiencing self is cast, like being thrown into a dark sea, at the point of death. The mistake, as Clarke clarifies, is to reify nothing, make it a positive condition or quality, for example of blackness, and then place the individual in it after death, so that we somehow fall into nothingness, to remain there eternally. Clarke is by no means the first to identify this logical error. More than 2,000 years ago, the Greek philosopher Epicurus declared, "Death is nothing to us. When we exist, death is not, and when death exists, we are not." Clarke contends that once we let go of this defective concept, that a kind of positive nothing is what awaits us, a peculiar and unintuitive vision begins to take shape, a new understanding of immortality. We are nearly prepared to explore Clarke's deep argument for the immortality of consciousness, but first, it's essential to grasp a foundational truth regarding conscious beings. Clarke terms this principle personal subjective continuity. This concept points to the reality that, as conscious entities, we perceive our entire existence as a single, unbroken succession of experiences. Although our lives contain numerous periods of unconsciousness, for instance during deep, dreamless sleep or when under general anesthesia, these moments of non-awareness simply do not register for us. This is what establishes our personal subjective continuity, where our subjectivity seamlessly connects all interruptions, making our whole life feel to us like one continuous flow of awareness. As Clarke notes, it is inherent to our nature as conscious beings that we always seem to exist to ourselves. This block of personal experience is framed by birth at its beginning and death at its end, yet in the same way we have no recollection of the billions of years that preceded our birth, we should not anticipate being thrust into an endless darkness after we die. Instead, Clarke puts forward that death will not signify the termination of experience. To grasp why, we will now consider a thought experiment, which I have adapted from the one presented in Clarke's essay. Envision a world where advanced medical science permits individuals to undergo an extraordinary procedure called life pause. Throughout the life pause process, a person's consciousness is temporarily suspended while complex surgeries, comparable to sophisticated makeovers for the brain and body, are performed. This technology facilitates not just the halting of subjective time but also the modification of memories, personality characteristics, and even one's physical form. Let us now introduce our subject, Alex. Seeking a radical transformation in his life, Alex opts to enter life pause for a considerable duration. He also grants the life pause technicians full authorization to implement any alterations to his mind and body they deem fit. Prior to the procedure, we have Alex Classic. Following the transformation, however, two potential outcomes await. The first we will label Alex 2.0. In this version, the adjustments made during life pause are relatively minor. Alex 2.0 awakens with a more polished iteration of his original traits, perhaps with a slightly modified personality or a few new tastes. For instance, Alex 2.0 discovers a newfound appreciation for coffee, a beverage Alex Classic disliked. From the perspective of Alex 2.0, this change is experienced as a fluid extension of the same conscious path through life. We can now proceed to the second possibility. In this case, the life pause procedure results in Alex Reborn. Here, the alterations are far more drastic. Alex Reborn awakens with profound changes, perhaps an entirely new personality, a different set of memories, and even a transformed physical appearance. Yet, despite these dramatic dissimilarities, the subjective experience of continuity is not broken. From Alex Classic to Alex Reborn, there is no noticeable interruption or gap in consciousness. Alex Reborn is markedly different from Alex Classic, and yet it still feels to him as if he has always existed. Whether Alex re-emerges as a refined version like Alex 2.0, or as a fundamentally different person like Alex Reborn, the essential realization is that, subjectively, the continuous thread of awareness endures. We now arrive at the concluding stage of our thought experiment. Imagine that instead of going through with life pause, Alex is involved in a deadly car accident on his way to the clinic, leading to his irreversible, natural death. Now, picture that at some later point, a new consciousness comes into being somewhere in the universe, completely devoid of any direct causal connection to Alex. We will, nonetheless, refer to this new consciousness as Alex Renewed. It is at this juncture that we grasp the astonishing truth: there is no discernible difference between what occurs during the life pause procedure and the subjective continuity that exists between these two widely separated conscious beings. Just as with life pause, the shift from Alex Classic to Alex Renewed involves no subjective gap. There is no experiential abyss, no direct confrontation with nothingness. Instead, mirroring the other scenarios, there is an unbroken transition from one subjective state to the next, even if the memories, personality, and physical form are vastly different. We are, quite simply, always this generic subjectivity, wherever and whenever it manifests in the cosmos. When we truly comprehend that every version of Alex shares the same fundamental identity, the implications are staggering. Alex is, in fact, everyone in every scenario. Alex is you. The crucial insight is that the events of death and birth can be viewed as subjectively identical to what transpires in the life pause scenario. In fact, it is the same process that occurs between every single conscious moment of our daily lives. As Clarke writes, even if all centers of awareness were extinguished and the next conscious creature appeared millions of years hence, perhaps in a galaxy far, far away, there would still be no subjective interregnum. Subjectivity would jump that objective gap just as easily as it jumps the gap from our last experience before sleep to the first upon awakening. All the boring eons that pass without the existence of a subject will be irrelevant for the subject that comes into being. Nor will they count as nothingness for all the conscious entities which cease to exist. Subjectivity, awareness, consciousness, experience, whatever we call it, never stops arising as far as it is concerned. The thought experiment reveals that our true, lasting identity is consciousness itself, or what Clarke labels generic subjectivity. It's important to clarify that this concept is quite distinct from the conventional notion of reincarnation, where your specific personality, after dying, would suddenly find itself occupying a new body. Instead, this continuum of consciousness goes beyond individual identity. It is more precise to state that you persist as consciousness itself. And while that might seem like a well-worn spiritual saying, the thought experiment demonstrates just how profoundly we share a subjective identity with all conscious beings. Pondering Clarke's argument, the neuroscientist Sam Harris observes, the birth of any conscious being after your death is in some sense deeply analogous to your own rebirth. Given your identity as consciousness, your survival of death is more or less assured as long as consciousness persists anywhere. Both Clarke and Harris present this concept of a continuous consciousness beyond death as a potential source of comfort for those who fear the end of their lives. Yet, others might perceive that such a perspective brings the diverse array of conscious experiences available in reality uncomfortably close. One must consider all the conscious experiences unfolding in the natural world, both the beautiful and the horrifying. Or think of the alien forms of mind that could arise in the distant future or in far-flung corners of the cosmos. As consciousness, our experience encompasses the most profound and peaceful states of enlightenment, as well as all the actual experiences that exist and will ever exist of immense suffering, loss, and unfulfilled desires. A number of philosophers have made the case that our fundamental identity is consciousness, and that this realization brings with it deep ethical consequences. In his compelling book, You Are Them, the philosopher Magnus Binding poses a challenge to his audience, asking, why are you the same person when you wake up in the morning as the you who went to sleep the night before? Why don't you instead wake up as a scared rabbit in a dark forest in the middle of the night? Well, who says that you don't? This is a perspective that aligns with both historical and modern philosophical ideas, one notable example being open individualism, a theory advanced by the contemporary philosopher Daniel Kolak. According to open individualism, there is only one numerically identical subject who is, in fact, everyone at all times. In this framework, there is no separate entity that serves as the possessor of first-person experiences. Instead, wherever awareness is present, there is you. Every conscious being that has ever lived or will ever live is experienced by the same underlying principle of awareness. To draw an analogy, we can conceptualize this awareness principle as being similar to the process of nuclear fusion that occurs in stars. There are trillions of stars throughout the universe, all of which are energized by nuclear fusion, yet we do not speak of there being trillions of distinct nuclear fusions. It is more accurate to say that there is a single process of nuclear fusion that fuels every star in existence. In a similar vein, there is just one principle of awareness that forms the basis for the countless minds in existence. From this viewpoint, there is no individual self or soul journeying through different experiences. There is only consciousness, experiencing itself through an infinite variety of forms. Regardless of whether we inhabit a purely physical universe, consciousness, by its very essence, transcends individuality and unites us in a collective, continuous experience of being. The New Age expression, "we are all one," is frequently paired with naive sentiments of universal peace and love. In reality, confronting the unvarnished truth of consciousness as our primary identity is a profoundly sobering experience. We come to see that there is, in fact, no ultimate escape for any conscious being, irrespective of their situation. We are, for all of time and down to the very last conscious entity, in this experience together. In this light, the acknowledgement that our truest identity is consciousness is far more than a simple remedy for the fear of death, it is an ethical awakening. There is ultimately nothing else for us to do but to endeavor to enhance the available experiences of all conscious beings within our sphere of influence. I, along with others, have contended that this will necessitate the systematic elimination, whenever feasible, of all preventable states of agony and suffering. A second, perhaps subordinate, imperative is the general cultivation of conscious states that all beings would likely deem worth experiencing, such as happiness, joy, and bliss. This emergent perspective profoundly questions many of our established human norms and behaviors. For instance, it invalidates any justification for retributive justice or what could be termed violence to consciousness. Speciesism, intergroup hostility, and selfish biases are exposed for what they truly are, consequences of a mistaken identity. Death is not a release from reality. Instead, dying, as Clarke describes it, is more precisely seen as more like the radical refreshment of subjectivity.